Alrighty, so I thought I would go through and break down the way this build has kind of all happened and just break it down section for section. So I'd go through some info on the way that I've set the car up relative to the suspension and tyres. So, you know, if you look at it basically, it's just a, you know, if you say it's just a 2-inch lift with double control arms. I'm running some 565/18, which is the wheel setup. So relative to the way that I wanted the car set up for what I was going to be doing, I think it's really important. I think that one of the things that are looked past when it comes to setting up suspension for off-road use or purposes, you know, the primary thing that a lot of people look for is maximum lift. They want that huge lift, they want the thing to look aggressive and whatnot, which 100%, you know, everybody wants a tough looking car. But there is some more important elements relative to how you want that car to perform. So we knew that we were going to have a payload in the back, a constant payload that would kind of be around that 150 to 200 kilo mark. So relative to the setup that I have in the canopy with the roof racks and the drawers and the fridge and all the bits and pieces that I keep in there, that constant load was going to be about 150 to 200 kilos. So we set up the rear suspension like that. So the way that we went with this is we went a Ironman foam cell lift kit. The foam cell are the largest bore shock and suspension setup available by Ironman at the moment, which gives you the full lift. So it's equivalent to about 2 inches of lift, which doesn't really sound like a great deal, but obviously once that's translated, you know, to the car and in practice, especially when you first get them and it takes a little bit of time for them to settle, you know, it does make quite a difference in terms of the overall dimensions and height of the car. This kind of enables you to do a little bit more in the way of what your wheel package is going to look like. So with our wheel package, we decided to go a 265/65/18 in a Wrangler Duratrack. This tyre is kind of set more, well, it's kind of marketed as a 70% off-road, 30% on-road tyre package. It does perform really, really well. I did quite a bit of research into which way I was going to go with the wheel and tyre package. I guess a bittersweet thing with the trim level that we selected, well, we didn't select, I guess we got lucky, and it happened to be the one that we wanted. So the car that I was genuinely interested in from the onset was the GLS spec, which I suppose is the second from the top. The only differences I think from the GLS to top of the range is that you get 360 surround camera and leather electric seats. Now, due to this whole COVID situation with the capacitor shortage and whatnot, you don't even get 360 anymore anyway, so you're only really getting leather to go to the top of the range. So, you know, economically and everything else, you know, the GLS is what we're after. Now, the setback with the GLS is, because it is the higher trim level, it gets a premium brake package, which is like, well, how can that be bad? Well, it's bad because the front caliper is massive. It's probably one of the biggest calipers I've ever seen on any car, given, you know, relative to the size of the car and the purpose of the car. They're absolutely massive. I've got some B-roll in there to show you guys how big this thing really is. And what unfortunately that limits you with is your rim package. So you can get a 16 on there, but you're calling it really, really tight with that caliper. A 17 makes the most sense, but unfortunately, due to the nature of the shape of that caliper, there's not a lot of wheels that will clear that caliper. So given that the MR series Triton is kind of fresh in terms of, I mean, it's 2018, but, you know, the world's been a bit different for the last couple of years. You know, there's not a great deal of development and stuff relative to this car, and not a lot of people are building this car. A lot of people are building the lower trim cars, which, you know, in many ways, I've always kind of been like, get the lower trim and spend the money on other stuff like your recovery gear and whatever. So totally for that, but unfortunately, not a lot of people are spending the dollars on the top end stuff. Relative to that, it was difficult for me to find a smaller wheel package because I wanted a taller sidewall, because, you know, the old wives' tale that, you know, less rim, more tyres better, which it is in most instances, but given the nature of what sort of work this car was going to be doing, it wasn't necessary for me to have a super ultra mega aggressive tyre package. Anything that was going to be quite capable would be fine, and that's exactly what the Duratracks are. So I hound on about the Duratracks because it's a really, really good tyre. They are available obviously in the size that I'm after. Going a 65 over a 60, it's a slightly taller sidewall and standard, so, you know, you're still kind of within that. Your speedo's not incorrect and all the rest of it, so there's no speedo correction that's necessary, no guessing what speed you're doing. It also is a really good performing tyre on the road, so, you know, in the wet, wet, in, you know, heavy rain, you know, even just that sort of breezy when it starts to rain, dry conditions and everything, they're not, you know, a huge amount. They are noisier, absolutely, but they're not in any way, shape or form, you know, howling down the highway when you're driving. So they are actually quite comfortable. They hold pressure really well in terms of, you know, having the car sat for some time. Every time I go to check tyre pressure, you know, they're always kind of pretty close to what I set them at. I think it's really important as well, relative to your tyre pressures, to choose your tyre pressures relative to what you're doing. So, and that gives you the most longevity out of your tyre. That's why, as a poor excuse, I don't have any valve caps on my wheels, because I've either lost them or, you know, I got sick of taking them on and off, adjusting tyre pressures consistently when I'm out. So yeah, but otherwise the tyre package works really well. I'm happy with the way, you know, it performs in both on-road and off-road conditions. Haven't had anything bad to say about them. Okay, it's only done about, you know, 5,000 Ks on those tyres, but, you know, 5,000 Ks is a lot considering that it's been done over a short period of time. And generally you wear past that top layer of the tyre and you can start really telling, you know, if it's getting louder or whatever, around that sort of 5,000 K mark anyway. So really, really happy with it. Kept the factory wheels. I did want something that looked a little bit more aggressive, but over time I've kind of found that, you know, I'm happy with the way the wheels look, and it kind of suits the way the car is at the moment. Ultra happy with it, and really, really good tyre package. So if anybody's considering, you know, whether or not an 18-inch, you know, tyre is still going to be just as good, you know, I've got 31s on a 15 on the Pajero, and obviously I've got some experience with the large sidewall tyres, and look, I've found that the 18s perform just as good as anything else that I've experienced. So happy with them. And going back to the suspension setup, from Ironman for the front and the rear, so I've got foam cells in the rear. I've got weight rated springs, so the constant load springs at around that 200 kilo mark. I've got greasable shackles in the rear of the leaves, and then of course those Pro billet forged upper control arms on the front. They obviously give you a nice bit of bling factor, of course, but it's more relative to keeping that alignment in check at that sort of lift. There is more aggressive setups in the way of lifts, you know, going with something like, you know, a 3-inch or a 4-inch lift with a diff drop and all the rest of it. But given the duties that this car is to do, I don't think it's necessary to go that extreme in the way of a suspension setup. I'm not looking to run anything extreme in the way of the wheel package. The wheel and tyre package works really well as it is. And, you know, I've got at least another 50,000 Ks. Well, probably not 50,000 Ks, but, you know, 30,000 Ks left on the tyres before, you know, it's time to change them up. So happy with the way they are performing, and I don't feel like I need any more at the moment. So that's pretty much the way that the suspension is set up. So, you know, overall, like I said at the start, it is just a 2-inch lift, but there is a little bit more to it, you know, making sure that you're driving with that constant load that you have set the car up for. In the community that I'm in, relative to the Facebook groups and whatnot, there's a lot of chatter about, you know, what suspension works the best and whatever, and the most important thing is to get the suspension that works best for you in the way of, you know, what your constant load is going to be like. When we first got the car, you chatter your teeth out in the way of kind of the high-speed rebound feeling, I guess, is what it was. It's really, really chattery, and kind of, you know, over corrugations was really rough. But you know, when you've got the load on that rear axle where the suspension is expecting it to be, you know, it drives really, really nice. It's extremely comfortable, really, it genuinely is. And that's saying a lot for the dual cab ute, which goes back to my original point as to how far these things have come. So I guess that kind of sums it up relative to the suspension and tyre package. If you guys have any questions about that, you know, if you've stumbled across my video because you're looking at doing a similar thing, feel free to, you know, comment below or send us a message and whatever, and we'll get back to you relative to that question. But then again, thanks again for joining me for this video, and I hope you're enjoying this series so far. And if you are, just like and subscribe. It makes a massive difference to channels like us that are trying to grow, and that way you'll stay posted as to, you know, as the build progresses. Thanks again for watching the video.